for this Advent season. Our series, our topics that we'll have are about God being with us. This time of year we remember Emmanuel, the word that literally translated means with us God. And that is a presence in our lives that we recognize, we acknowledge, we accept, we believe in. And so that's what we celebrate. And we look forward to the celebration of Christmas, which is literally God with us, right? Jesus born in the manger, God becoming one of us, to walk among us, to live among us. But as we talk about and think about God with us, we're going to look at theophanies in the Old Testament. The word theophany is a word that means appearance of God. So God appearing, God showing up in the lives of people in the Old Testament. And when God shows up, things are different. Things aren't the way that we would expect them. See, it's not a vision or a voice. Those things happen in the Old Testament fairly regularly, right? The word of the Lord came to Moses. The word of the Lord came to Joshua and the prophets and Isaiah and Jonah and all the people who spoke on God's behalf or were directed by God as the word of the Lord came to them. But in the theophany, it's a little bit different. It's not just a vision or a voice. It's God showing up in a tangible, physical kind of way. Some argue that at least some, if not most, or even all of these appearances of God, God showing up, are pre-incarnate Jesus, manifest in a human form. So the second person of the Trinity coming to do things among God's people in a physical and tangible way prior to the birth of Jesus in the flesh. Not sure about that. There's some strength in the argument, but it's not something that the Bible describes and says, this is who this is, right? So we can't say definitively, oh, that's Jesus showing up. But there's some strength in that argument, so it's going to be one of those things we can say, could be, but we don't know for sure. But when God shows up, things change. God doesn't do things according to our understanding, expectations, or limitations, right? God doesn't do things according to our expectations, our limitations, or our understanding of how things should be. And in both these readings for tonight, a child was promised. The child. Abraham and Sarah were waiting on God. Because the promise of the child that's going to be born to Sarah doesn't originate with the text that we read tonight. It goes back a few chapters, Genesis chapter 15. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. So this is still Abram, same person, different name, prior to his name change. And here it's the word of the Lord coming in a vision. So this is not the theophany. Fear not, Abram, I am your shield, your reward shall be very great. But Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me, for I continue childless? And the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abram said, Behold, you have given me no offspring, and a member of my household will be my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him. This man shall not be your heir. Your very own son shall be your heir. And he brought him outside and said, Look toward the heaven and number the stars, if you're able to number them. Then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. A promise to Abram. Check out the stars. Elsewhere, there's a promise to Abram. Look at the sand. You're going to have so many offspring, they won't be able to be numbered. This is for you. Abram, the one who was chosen by God to inherit the land, the whole connection to him is somewhat mysterious. It's not well defined. Like, why did God pick Abram from where he was and move him to the promised land and build the whole nation of Israel through his family tree? Why? We don't really know. It was God's choice. But he makes this promise, and Abraham at this point is already getting up there, right? So, they're thinking, they're waiting, they're hoping, and nothing happens. They weren't so patient after a while. One chapter later, in Genesis chapter 16, but 10 years after they've been living in the land of Canaan, finally, they're ready to take matters into their own hands. Maybe the story's familiar. Sarah's like, you know what? God made this promise, but he didn't say how. See? And I've got this servant named Hagar, and maybe that's how. I could have children through her. What do you think? And Abram agrees. Abram takes Hagar to be a second wife, and Ishmael is born. What happens when we take control? What happens when we want to do things our way? How long should we wait? They probably doubted God's promise. I mean, you kind of have to in order to take that kind of action, right? If God specifically promised your offspring and, you expected this is how it's going to go, but nothing happened. Eventually, I think it's reasonable to see that doubt would creep in. How many of us like to wait? We don't like to wait for anything. We live in an instant everything kind of world. You can make meals in a few minutes. You can get the news at your fingertips with something that's likely in your pocket or nearby. We can know what's going on the other side of the world like that. We don't like to wait at all. Who likes traffic? Who likes going to the mall on Black Friday and waiting in line? Not many people that I know. We don't like to wait. They didn't want to wait. They took control and took action against God's plan and design. And then there's Mary. Now, Mary, she wondered, right? She wondered about the angel's message. This is not a theophany in the gospel reading we heard this morning or this evening. That's habit for you right there. At the greeting, so she wondered a few things. At the greeting first, greetings, O favored one, the Lord is with you. She wondered what kind of greeting that might be. And who wouldn't if an angel says that to you? And at the promise, and then Mary said to the angel, how will this be since I am a virgin? And probably about the timing. And probably about how it would affect her life. And probably there's a lot of thoughts going through Mary's head as this angel is telling her, you're going to bear a child who's going to be the Son of God. Like, wow. Now, Moses was bold enough to say, I think you got the wrong person. Mary doesn't say it out loud, but I wouldn't be all that shocked if we find out at some point that she was freaking out at the whole possibility. Have you been worried? Have you been concerned? Have you been confused? Are we waiting? Are we wondering? Are we growing impatient? Through all of this, tonight's reminder is that God renews our hope. God renews our hope. And that happens here in chapter 18 as the Lord came to Abraham. The Lord, this is Yahweh, the God of the universe, coming to Abraham. The Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre as he sat in the door of his tent in the heat of the day. Now, Abraham right away recognizes what's going on. Or he's entertaining these strangers, these men, these people who show up out of the hospitality that was ingrained in the culture. One way or another, he knew that he needs to do something. He needs to, serve some food. He needs to take care of these people. But God had appeared to him already. In chapter 12, with the call, God had shown up. And in 17 verse 1, so the prior chapter, when Abram in that chapter was 99, the Lord appeared to him. And that was the whole covenant and circumcision narrative. So Abram experienced a theophany in the way that this appears 3 times, or at least that's an appearance of God coming to him. Here, there's 3 men. Who are they? It is tempting theologically to jump into, oh, look, we've got 3 people. This is God. This is the Trinity. But the way that the narrative reads moving forward with the whole Sodom and Gomorrah stuff, they're labeled as angels later on, 2 of them. But God's there. God's among them. So it's best understood as God and 2 angels manifest in human form. And in that scene, the promise of a child is renewed. Sarah would bear a child. This is what we heard at verse 10. The Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. And Sarah in the tent, hearing these words, knowing what was promised, knowing that, the whole Hagar and Ishmael thing is what they'd been doing, and, then she thinks, well, when I was in middle school, I took biology class, and I'm not sure how that works. This is what it says, verse 11. Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. The way of women had ceased to be with Sarah. It was biologically no longer possible. In the same way that for Mary, it was biologically not going to be possible. Not precisely the same, but in the same way, both of them biologically, reasonably, according to our expectations, are like, well, hold on. So Sarah responded reasonably. She laughed. She laughed to herself, saying, after I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure? How do we respond when things don't make sense? Waiting can be hard. It can be disappointing. We have 3 kids spread out over 10 and a half years. That wasn't our plan. As we were talking about, frequency and kids and how this is going to work, and like a lot of people, it was every couple of years, roughly. And so we expected, this is how it's going to go. And it didn't. And month after month, it was kind of disappointing. To the point where we kind of stopped expecting and hoping and wondering. Waiting can be hard. Not just waiting for a child, waiting for anything, waiting for God to act, waiting for God to show up, waiting for something that we're hoping for, anticipating, expecting. It can be difficult. But here's the truth. God delivers. God delivers. Isaac was indeed born. If we jump ahead to chapter 21, the Lord visited Sarah as he had said. And the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children, yet I have borne him a son in his old age. Did you hear this early in the reading? The Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and did to Sarah as he had promised. And she conceived and bore Abraham a son at the time of which God had spoken. As he said, as he promised, at the time of which he had spoken. This is God keeping his promises. This is what he does. Not as we expect, not according to limitations that we would place on him. God doesn't do limitations. He's infinite. He's all-powerful. He's almighty. He doesn't play by the rules that bind us and control us. He can do it by his word, that same word that spoke things into existence, that same word that comes to us with that same kind of promise. I'm with you. I care about you. I know what you're going through. I'm here. And we can trust in him. The Word became flesh. The word of promise took on human form, according to John chapter 1, and according to the promise made through the angel to Mary, that she would bear a son. And Jesus was indeed born. According to promise and prophecy, Jesus was born. And so now leaning on the promises of God, we know we can trust in him. Be renewed in hope. If hope has been fleeting, maybe tonight with the flicker of the candle of hope, our hope can be rekindled. Be patient with God because his timing is right. Wait for the Lord, be strong and take courage, and wait for the Lord, and be faithful to God, leaning on his power. God is with us. And that changes everything. Amen.